So, over the years, I've taken a lot of victory laps over predictions that I've made that most people have disagreed with, and at the time, I was ridiculed so much, I got way more dislikes than likes. The most famous example would probably be the video I made back in 2021, where I literally said that Stadia will shut down by 2023, and sure enough, I got it right by the exact year. Another one that I made, and people are still kind of delusional about this, is that VR is nothing more than a niche and it has no real future in gaming. I think that has been proven over the past few years. While it has grown, it is still nowhere near reaching the mainstream, nowhere near overtaking traditional gaming experiences. I said that back in early 2016, and I've been proven right 7 years later, even though, like I said, people are still denying that VR has been a bust. Another thing that has been a complete bust that I knew was going to happen eventually was eSports. Esports is one of those things that is just so overhyped. I mean, the idea of calling it esports, I get it, it's like virtual sports, but even just having it on the same level as real sports has always been a joke to me. Like having it on ESPN, the talk of having esports tournaments in the goddamn Olympic Games, it was getting ridiculous. But there were a lot of people that sought out a career in esports, depending on what game it was, and also people who invested a lot of money. Robert Kraft, he is the owner of the New England Patriots and also the New England Revolution for MLS, and MLS is another thing. Oh man, I love, like, I want to talk about sports, but it doesn't fit this channel. Definitely going to create another channel one day, just talking about sports. But he's a smart dude, and you think he knows what he's doing when it comes to sports. Multi-billionaire. He also, the third team that he owns, besides an NFL team and an MLS team, is an Overwatch League team, the Boston Uprising. And Overwatch League was always the one league that was cited by many people as being like the ultimate esports league. And it was just the prime example of how esports can bring in so much money and can do all these great things. Well, Overwatch League is about to shut down. It is pretty much inevitable. Activision Blizzard has indicated that that is going to happen at some point, and they laid off pretty much their entire esports staff a couple months back. All across the board, no matter what game we're talking about, no matter what esports organization we're talking about, they're bleeding money. They're losing viewers. They're oftentimes selling their leagues at a loss because they just don't want to be involved in this business anymore. It was all speculation. That's all it was. There was no actual money that was being made with this whole esports thing, but people were hoping that one day it would. But it was kind of obvious to me that it was never going to really become a huge thing. Mostly because of the very concept of esports is that you're watching professional gamers play in these multi-million-dollar tournaments, which can be exciting. And, obviously sports is a very huge thing. Football, basketball, baseball, soccer are very huge multi-billion-dollar industries in the United States. But I think the reason why people watch professional football a lot more so than they watch professional gaming is that although you can play Overwatch and you're probably never going to be a professional, or CSGO, you're not going to be a professional, but you can still get the core experience of the game and you're still playing it, and that seems a lot more worthwhile at the end of the day than spending 2-3 hours watching a tournament of a whole bunch of people trying to make money off of it. With the NFL, you're never going to be a football player, right? So that's why it's so appealing, because you're watching people that can do stuff that you can never do. But at the end of the day, if you want to play these video games, you can do it, no problem. And it's a much better and more fulfilling experience, experiencing it for yourself than watching other people do it. Yes, the whole Twitch streaming thing, and there's a huge industry with people watching other people play video games, but it's more about the individual person. You want to interact with them rather than just focusing and honing in on the gameplay itself. There's so many people that just suck ass at video games, but they still have a huge audience and a huge following. DSP Gaming is a good example of that. I don't know if his audience is so huge these days, but because of his personality, for better or worse, he got a lot of attention. But he was complete dog shit at video games. So I think it really just has more to do with the person themselves, with the celebrity aspect of it, than people actually having a genuine desire to watch video games and watch people play them. Because if that was the case, then no commentary videos would be a lot more popular. Like, just raw gameplay videos would get much more views than the videos of people in their face cams and doing all this crazy stuff. Like, that's really where the appeal lies in. With professional sports, it's a mixture of both. You want to see your Aaron Judge and your Patrick Mahomes and all these big stars, but you also want to see a good game, right? With esports, first of all, the personalities over there are dry as hell. Like, there is really no one very interesting. Like, that's a big money draw that's going to sell out arenas, that's going to do all these things. Like, no, it's just, it's not there. These people, they're very good at playing video games, but that's about it. They got the personality of a wall. You don't have a Conor McGregor or a Dwayne Johnson of the esports world, because nobody's really interesting enough to do that. And I think it's because the general population, including myself, are just don't really take the whole thing seriously. The people who play the video games and play in these tournaments, they very much take the game seriously, but it's still, at the end of the day, people playing video games professionally, which has always had a negative connotation, especially them trying to compare esports to sports like they were trying to do, and actually trying to liken a professional gamer to an actual athlete, someone who is pushing themselves to their physical limits and is training year-round and is just the best at their game in a sport, is nothing compared to people who are just on their keyboard or on their controller. Yeah, maybe you're working out your index finger, and that's about it. You can agree or disagree with my assessment of esports, but the numbers don't lie. They're operating at losses. None of these places are making any money. They're paying these esports players millions upon millions of dollars, but they're not actually making a profit. So while they're operating at a loss, they're paying all these people all this money. It's a bubble that is finally bursting. It's been going on for a couple years now, but now it's finally starting to implode. And the fact is, like, football is always going to be football, right? 100 years from now, people are still going to care about football. In 100 years, people are not going to care about Overwatch. People already are losing interest in Overwatch or Call of Duty or whatever it is. Games, like, the video game industry is just such a cyclical thing that you're not going to have one specific video game be like the thing that everyone's playing for decades and decades and decades. You're building an entire business around one single video game, like they did with Overwatch, like they're doing with Call of Duty, like they're doing with all these other things. Like these esports leagues are all based around one game, but that one game can very easily no longer be relevant. I got some pushback back in 2018 when the Heroes of the Storm game no longer got updates, and it was pretty clear that Blizzard was phasing it out. Well, that's because people weren't really playing it. But, it was a sad story because of all these esports players. Some of them dropped out of school, made a whole bunch of sacrifices to make their dream come true. But I was just like, this shit is so risky and so volatile. Like, basing your entire career around one video game. Like, I get YouTube streamers because they can just move around between different games and they can maintain an audience that way. But yeah, it's just like, how did you not know that that was going to bite you in the ass? People were hating on me for saying it, but I'm like, it's completely true. It's common sense. How do you try to build a stable business around something that is just so volatile and always changing, and there's a new game that people are playing every single week? Like there are some games that maintain popularity for a long extended period of time, like CSGO. That game is still pretty popular 11 so years later, but they're the exception, not the rule. And even then, it's had plenty of peaks and valleys over the years. There's a game called Quake Champions that came out a number of years ago. Free to play, the newest game in the Quake series, trying to bring back the arena shooter. And people are talking about how the arena shooter is dead for XYZ reasons. It's dead because the developers didn't give enough money, didn't give enough resources to actually, make it reach its full potential. I think it's just the nature of the gameplay, it having such a very, 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 very high skill ceiling, and the whole point of the gameplay is just how uber competitive it is, with zero consideration towards casual players. Yeah, obviously it's going to be a niche game. I think it averages like 300 players on Steam, even though it's free to play. There's a guy called Magnamaster. He's been a longtime viewer and fan and friend of the channel. he is a huge fan, huge player of Quake Champions. He has thousands upon thousands of hours. But he told me, like, that is a game that you really need to commit yourself to in order to really get the full experience. He has spent dozens upon dozens of hours, probably more, just studying the game and learning its mechanics and just training and practicing and doing all these things. Only a select few percentage of the player base is going to be interested in an experience like that because it's such a niche thing. Dedicating thousands of hours on one video game, you know, but that's what you need to do in order to actually be good at this thing. And, like, also, though, like, okay, the game can have nobody playing it, but you think with how competitive it is, with how high the skill ceiling is, with the fact that most people cannot even hope to achieve the level of competence and skill that the very top players are going to have. Like in Call of Duty, you're like, there's a, like, it's such a low skill ceiling that it really feels like anybody can play the game at a competent level. But Quake Champions, a different story. I think what I'm trying to get at is that, you know, with a game like that, you would expect that there would be people who would at least be interested in watching it, right? But the Quake Champions eSports scene died much faster than the game itself did. And I think that truly emphasizes the key difference here between quote-unquote eSports and real sports. In any given sport, there's a whole lot more, millions upon millions more people that watch these games more than they actually play them, whether we're talking about baseball, soccer, football, cricket, whatever it is. You can't name a case of a single video game that has more people watching it than playing it. So I think that really emphasizes that this whole professional gaming concept was destined to fail and had no real mainstream appeal. It's inevitable that the money's going to dry up, even if you're initially successful, because the game is not going to have continuous sustained growth and overall interest, because that's just not how video games work. People are generally much more interested in experiencing these games for themselves than they are watching it. So the whole esports thing kind of has no reason to exist, and it seems like it's only going to get worse from here on out. And honestly, I'm all for it, because for the longest time, you had these online games that were designed for esports in mind, that were designed specifically for competitive games, and they actually had esports players that were influencing certain balancing and design choices. Whether we're talking about Call of Duty, for many years, they were really, really interested in what the esports people had to say about that, and they actually made a lot of changes to cater to the esports crowd. And there were other games, too, that like all they really cared about was making the esports community happy and not the 99.9% of people that just wanted to play the game regular, you know? So it's good that these super competitive gamers are becoming completely irrelevant and that esports is irrelevant. You can hate everything that I've said about esports, but you can't, you're going against the facts, because even if you may personally be invested in it, it is not a viable business, considering how much the viewership is down 30. League of Legends, that's the number one esports league right now. Viewership of League of Legends is down 32% from 2021 to 2023. Companies are pulling their money out. Sponsorship money is drying up. Advertising is drying up, because people are finally realizing, investors are realizing, that this is a business that really was created entirely on speculation and just the concept of it, rather than it actually having a real market demand.